All right, so that's the bad news. Let me finish up here fairly quickly. I think the upside here will be surprising. Electric power is coming back, or the supply capacity in the Tokyo area is coming back faster than TEPCO had initially predicted, thank goodness. It's still going to be a hot summer. My understanding is office buildings in Japan are all going to raise the temperature inside. But having done that, that should be enough to keep demand below the available supply. Factories ought to be able to operate. The supply chain disruptions will be beginning to fade out. Several weeks ago, Toyota had said, oh my goodness, not until the end of this year. I think now we're hearing it's going to be maybe September. They will be back to full production. The NBO phenomenon should be fading out, particularly if it's hot in Tokyo, inside all those office buildings. Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to go out and drink their beer, and that will help. And in the affected areas where damage occurred, reconstruction is already beginning to kick in, and you're going to see a bump up in GDP over the next couple of years as the construction industry, iron and steel, glass, all of those things that go into rebuilding destroyed property get a boost. The unknown, of course, is how long does the nuclear problem persist? I guess I'm actually relatively optimistic on that one. So at the end of the day, Japan still is the #3 economy in the world. It will and is already recovering from this disaster. It is still one of the most affluent nations in the world. The supply chain disruptions actually, as others have said, illustrate how closely we are tied. That is the reality that we face. Japan has not gone away. It is rather resilient. And that actually makes me feel pretty good about the Japanese economy going forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ed. One statistic I think you didn't cover, which is, and I haven't seen the exact number, but apparently there's been a great spike up in marriages in Japan as a result of this. So perhaps that'll help with the demographic problem.
That's a puzzle.
Now, I know Bill has to leave in about 5 minutes or so, and Nancy, if you'll indulge us, if we could ask Bill just a question or two. Anyone in the audience who wants to put a question on these blue cards, please do so. The staff will pick them up. But I wonder, taking advantage as the moderator here, if I could ask Bill about his own, your own thoughts about where Japan is headed post 3/11 and what sort of impact that will have on your business in particular.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, I'm no expert in this area, but I can only gauge it by the buildings that we own, and all of the buildings that we own in Japan today are apartment buildings, and so you've got obviously consumers that are in those buildings. We own 50 apartment buildings throughout Japan, of which 75% of those roughly are in Tokyo. The occupancies are running in the 96% range. We don't have any fallout in terms of delinquencies. The side benefit for us, and I don't know if this is the silver lining, is that the financing costs in Japan today are at almost all-time lows. And so the financing, and the banks, generally speaking, are all getting back into the lending business. There was a period of really 2 years where the banking system basically wasn't financing anything. So the financing that we just completed in March, which was almost a $300 million financing, we financed that at right around 2% fixed for 5 years. And so any financing that you can get like that, really almost anywhere globally today, is very, very attractive financing. So, my outlook is I tend to be, as I said, an optimist, but I think there are going to be opportunities for companies like ours to actually acquire more assets during this period of time, and so that's what we're doing. We're looking for opportunities to buy things right now.
And one other quick question before you leave from the audience. With the yen as strong as it is, do you anticipate additional investment, real estate and otherwise, here in Southern California?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I think it's happening really in a global sense. I mean, you're seeing the Canadian dollar as strong as it is, and so in our business, you're seeing the influence of Canadians now buying, particularly in the second home markets like Hawaii. We have a pretty big presence in Hawaii, and we're selling a lot of product to Canadians. The yen, the strength of the yen, to be honest about it, from our perspective, has been quite surprising. When we first went public there in 2002, the yen was at 134, and so today down at 80, with everything that's gone on, it is a bit of a surprise to us. I think that clearly the Japanese, I mean, listening to the Panasonic story was, very, very interesting to me, because you see a company, $80 billion, was that the number? $80 billion in revenues. I mean, so the Japanese companies in general are just so global in nature, and always will play a huge role in the world economy. So I would think that the yen, eventually, when everything gets settled back down here, will have a positive influence. I hear rumors that the Japanese banks are hunting around for opportunities now to buy things here in the United States, so we'll see.
Great. Well, thank you, Bill. And we don't want to have you miss your plane, so thanks again for joining us.
See you later.
And Nancy, thanks for indulging us. The floor is yours.
All right. Everybody's taller than I am. I am promised to be brief, but what I'm here to do today is to share with you some of the results of a report that we at the Kaiser Center in Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation produced earlier this year. Now, it happens that the report was released 3 weeks approximately before March 11th. And so there's been considerable interest in our findings, but I think the findings are relevant even if we had not gotten into the current set of issues and problems that we have in Japan. So the report is very fat. I promise to be brief. And it is available online at LAEDC's website. And I finish up with a slide that has the wrong directions because somebody's been playing with our website, but I'll fix it when we get there. So let's talk about what is in the report. The growing together concept is a very interesting one because over a longish history, over 100 years now, Japan and Los Angeles County specifically now, this is an example of Japan matters for Los Angeles, have been growing more close together. The ties that bind them have increased and grown tighter, at the same time that both areas have been growing, as economists speak, bigger. Okay? And so in the report, we try to document all of the different ties that exist, and it's really remarkable how many of them we did find and that we can document, and then speculate some about what the relationship might look like in the future. So we begin with a discussion of Japan's remarkable economic history, very rapid growth in the 1960s into the 70s and 80s at somewhat slower rate, the problems in the 90s. You could see Japan feel the sting from the global recession in 2008 and 9, recovery in 2010, looks to me like we'll have a negative number coming up again in 2011. He's the expert. I'll defer to him, but he says yes. Okay, so back into the red in 2011, but then green again in 2012 and beyond. In LA County, we have some similarities. The early 1990s began with our own recession and collapse in the real estate market, difficulties in the financial sector. Fairly good growth in the early 1990s, but again, problems that came with the recession, some recovery in 2010, and again, expecting it in 2011. LA County, for those of you who don't know it, is a big place. It's ranked number 1 in the U.S. with population, almost 10 million. My boss rounds it up to 10 million. The Asian population, last count, is about 1.5 million. There are at least 102,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans who live here. There are nearly 47,000 Asian-owned businesses. Those are the last statistics we have. And businesses in professional, scientific, technical services, okay, almost 250,000 people work in those industries. And we are the nation's trade capital with a two-way trade value of not quite $350 billion. Those are big numbers, okay? It's kind of fun to work for a company like LAEDC to get out and be able to say, I'm short, so I don't get to do this very often, to say, we're number 1. All right, some things born in Los Angeles. A lot of scientific things, ranging from the internet, the space shuttle. Do you know that our space shuttle is coming back to the California Science Museum? Okay, we built them here. The Douglas DC-3, built in Long Beach. Disney characters, the Barbie doll, the modern T-shirt. And at LAEDC, we have such T-shirts, I can assure you. So we range widely from aerospace to apparel, from technology to entertainment. There's a very diverse set of important industries that are centered here. The county is expected to grow fairly rapidly. The income levels per capita in Japan and Los Angeles are about the same, expected to grow. Okay, we are nowhere near as big as Japan in terms of population or gross product, but we're going to make our way. So, when did the relationship begin? In U.S. documentation, the first Japanese immigrants arrived in Hawaii to work on the plantations there in 1868. Some arrived in 1869 in the U.S. mainland. By the 1870 census, we had Japanese residents in the U.S., most of them in California. By 1900, there are all of 500 Japanese residents, mostly in Los Angeles County. And then the population grew and grew and grew. So there are now over 100,000 resident in LA County alone. This is a large group of people. Where are the Japanese communities? Well, most of them, many of them, the largest center in terms of population are in Torrance. But there are significant communities of Japanese and Japanese Americans in Little Tokyo, downtown, Gardena, Monterey Park, and because we're on the west side, over in the Sawtell, I think that's west. Okay, over on the Sawtell area, we have them. Many cities in Los Angeles County have, as you have mentioned, sister cities relationships in Japan. There are educational ties. These are interesting because the LAEDC, we did a survey of the local colleges and universities, and we asked them, how many Japanese students do you have? And for those who count them, how many Japanese American students do you have? And what we estimate based on our survey is that there are at least 1,000 Japanese students enrolled in LA County colleges and universities. And not quite 30% of these are